When you have a title called Splitting the Breast, hello, insects of YouTube, and welcome to the next episode of Congratulations, the Neon Genesis Evangelion Retrospective. Today we're here to talk about the next episode. I believe it's episode 16. Yes, it is. Episode 16, known as The Splitting of the Breast. Very eloquent title. So let us just dive right on into this masterpiece, and let's see what happens. Asuka. Goddamn, she's a bitch. Well, clearly, we establish here that for some reason Shinji likes to cook. Okay, fine. Everybody has their own little quirks, right? Shinji's is just he cooks. Actually, you know what? That makes a lot of sense because when people cook, they tend to be alone. Asuka starts yelling at him because he's like, oh, I'm sorry, I made your water too hot. And judging by his voice, he actually wasn't being serious with apologizing. He was just like, oh, I'm sorry. And then, of course, Asuka starts yelling at him. I was like, why do you always say sorry and all that shit and all this crap? And why do you always do this? And Shinji's like, I don't know. I've just always said I'm sorry because, well, if I do something wrong, that's the, you know, the polite thing to do. Of course, Asuka has no idea what the word polite even means. And I was very happy to see that Misato actually was defending Shinji. That she was like, ah, that's just who he is. Deal with it. She might as well have said that. She was like, fucking Asuka, deal with it. However, I can tell you something that I don't like about this opening, and that is, that was a big fucking reveal at the end of the last episode, and it's like, it's totally ignored in this opening. Now, maybe Misato's putting on a persona, a fake persona, to try to hide what she's really thinking, because, I mean, she is kind of spaced when she's drinking her beer, and not because she's getting intoxicated. For fuck's sake, she's drank so much beer, I don't think she's capable of getting intoxicated really anymore. However, what's going on here is, I believe, Hideki Anno wasn't meaning that at all. I think she really is just getting annoyed with the fact that Asuka is being a fucking bitch. And I think that's what he was going for, which is kind of a downfall. Now, of course, this can't really be a downfall because later on in the episode, it's brought up full force and strains the relationship between Misato and Ritsuko, which is actually a pretty heavy fucking scene. Fuck it, the entire episode is rather heavy, or at least the second half. And then, of course, Asuka is unbelievably jealous now because literally from this point on, her character, there is no progression. That is her problem. There is zero progression, and that's why I hate her in general, is because there is no progression with her ever since Misato and Kaji kind of got together. And if you fuck up my tripod cat, I'm gonna kill you. There is no progression. And she just takes out her anger, and she does in this opening on Misato. She's like, just because you and Kaji are happy, don't mean you need to project it out on all of us. Fuck you. And first off, Misato isn't really happy. She's just stating a fact. This is what Shinji is like. And I feel bad for Shinji because he's over there doing all the fucking work because those two are too fucking lazy to do anything. And you know what? It's good that this episode kind of brings back up the friendship between Ritsuko and Misato, because it was kind of missing from the last few episodes, but this reminds us of how close those two actually are. Because Hyuga comments that Misato looks very tired, and she does. Props to the animation. And she goes, oh, it's just for a lot of personal reasons, and then instantly, Ritsuko goes, Kaji, and she goes, shut up! And I thought that was just a nice character moment for those two. And then, of course, it's also very nice to see that Shinji, you know, he really has improved. Of course, it's going to be completely destroyed in the next episode. But it's good to see that Shinji is actually, and kind of in this episode, but it's good to see that Shinji, through all this progression that he's had, it's actually had a positive outcome, and that is his synchronization with the Eva has grown significantly. In fact, it's surpassed Asuka, because Asuka had the highest one previous. And of course, Asuka, being the jealous type, doesn't take very nice to that. Now, of course, in the changing room, she's all like, oh, hey, she's all complimenting Shinji and stuff like that in front of Rei. But as soon as fucking Rei leaves, as soon as she leaves, she punches her locker. And she has the angriest look I have ever seen that woman have on her face. And that explains it all, doesn't it? That explains it all. How dare somebody be better than her? How dare somebody, you know, try to improve themselves? So from this point on, her entire mission in this life is to both tear down Misato for being with Kaji, and to tear down Shinji because he has a higher sync rate than her. And then we finally get our first glimpse of the angel. Which I have to say, this was actually one of my favorite angels, because of how obscure it is. And I kind of wish that this angel made its way into the Rebuild movies, but it didn't, because this is a huge... This episode is unbelievably important. Now, why do I like this angel a lot? It's really creative. One, because the giant ball that you see floating above you is actually the thing's shadow. The angel is actually what looks like the real shadow, but really this ball is. And that's, I think, creative and original. That, and it makes a totally awesome sound effect. It is so cool, because they say that the evacuations went very well. It is so cool seeing the Evas being very stealthy. I mean, the guy who loves giant robots in me is like, oh, because, you know, they're hiding up against building, all Mission Impossible style, and they're sneaking around trying not to get seen by the Eva, trying to be seen by the angel, and it's really cool how stealthy these things can actually be, considering how gigantic they are. Another thing, too, that I actually like to add some more credibility to this thing is that, you know, the umbilical cord thing that keeps their power at a constant rate. There's a part where Asuka runs out of line, and she ejects it quickly, and then grabs another one that was nearby. I like that, and that gives, stuff like that makes this universe so cool, in terms of their technology. In fact, in my Godzilla series, I fashioned quite a bit of the technology after this, because I liked it that much. The entire crux of this episode revolves around the fact that Shinji basically gets eaten by this angel. And something that kind of reminds me of the creature that kills Tasha Yar in the first season of Star Trek TNG. Like it or hate it, I won't get into it. But, it's all Asuka's fault. It is. Everything that happens in this episode is because of Asuka. She's so jealous that she's like, oh yeah, she's putting Shinji up, saying, why doesn't Shinji take point? He's the best. And of course, Shinji being weak-willed is like, okay. And so he takes point, not trying to be a show-off, he just takes point, and he gets eaten. And of course, this devastates Misato. This devastates really everyone, because, you know, Eva Unit 01 is the Eva. I'm gonna go on a rant about Asuka here. I am. I'm gonna go on about a rant. I've said previous in episodes, she's the reason why I hate, or she is the reason why this isn't my favorite show. I also openly admit that she is the one thing done better in the rebuilds. Because literally from this point onward, any chance of there being any character progression at all with her is gone. She has none. She has no redeeming qualities at all. And that's her problem, isn't it? You can, Hidekiana, you can make a character a bitch all you want. You can make a character as much of an asshole, as much of a bitch, as you possibly want. You're fine, you're okay. But you're lacking something here that is important for any of these kind of characters, and that is a sense of sympathy. We don't get anything with Asuka until episode 22. And you see, that's the thing that makes the rebuilds better, is that she actually starts forming an attachment to Shinji and Rei, to Misato. She looks past, you know, literally her past, and actually starts liking them. In fact, it's a huge point in 2.0. It's the fact that she was willing to do that. The fact that she, and the fact that when she goes to sleep next to Shinji in 2.0, she says, don't tell anyone we did this, keeping kind of in that bitchy character, but she's like, you know, I do care for you. You know what, you're the closest thing to a friend that I've ever really had. Don't tell anyone I said that, and if you do, I'll kill you, but don't do it. And you see, it's stuff like that that makes her sympathetic. Because you see that she has a soft spot underneath her. And that's lacking in the show. And you know what? It's also lacking in the manga. They had a perfect chance to blend the two in the manga, and they fucked it up. The manga she's the same goddamn cunt that she is in this. That is her problem. That's just bad character. That's just bad writing. You don't make a character like this and have her not be sympathetic. You don't. That's a no-no. Now, I know Hideki Anno went out and he stated that all three of the main characters are based directly off of, you know, the classifications of a mental disorder. I don't care. I know you abandoned the typical three-act structure that most movies have. You know that shouldn't be a problem with me. I'm a fan of Stanley Kubrick. Stanley Kubrick always abandons that shit. But you need to make this character sympathetic. And you don't. You fail. Miserably. And it is literally, from this episode forward, I mentioned before that there is a sense in this show of omnipotence. And it kind of disappeared for a while, but it comes back in full force here. Especially when Shinji is sinking into this tar shit, screaming, Misato, what do I do? Misato, what is this? You know, could you give me some clue? Can you help me here? And literally all the characters are powerless to help him. You get that a lot in this show. And be that good, be it bad. I personally like it. But again, I need to be in a certain mindset when watching it. You feel helpless with the characters. All this shit that goes down, literally from this point on, you feel helpless. You know, it's not like, let's go with a good example, Avatar: The Last Airbender. You're rooting for them. You literally don't want to see anything bad happen to them. If there's good characters, like most of the characters in the show, you have that. You feel attached to those characters. You don't want to see anything happen to them. This is no exception. But the difference in Avatar: The Last Airbender was you could, I know it sounds really corny, but you scream, fuck yeah! You scream, oh come on, get him, get him, get him! You know, when Aang's fighting the Fire Lord and all these explosions going off, you're rooting for Aang. You're like, come on Aang, you gotta win this. You're literally on the edge of your seat. That's not with Evangelion. Evangelion, you feel so helpless viewing. Especially on this episode, and end of Evangelion, don't even get me started. You feel so powerless, and a lot of it has to do with how it's shot. Now, I know a lot of anime to save money keeps things still, and this is no exception, but I think that works to this episode's advantage, especially in this one, because it cuts to specifically the view of Misato, and her reaction is just one of pure horror. She's like, oh my god, what the fuck's going on? And she's devastated when Shinji disappears. She is legitimately worried about Shinji because, believe it or not, at this time, I think Misato either A, thinks of Shinji as a son, or B, thinks of Shinji as that younger brother. You know, somebody to take care of. Because he literally is her responsibility, and she takes it all upon herself. Which is another reason why I think Misato is the hero. Again, I already brought up the comparison. Let's look at Sam from Lord of the Rings. Sam, when Frodo abandons him, Sam is going back down. He's taking it all on himself. Because Gandalf said, here, if anything happens to him, it's on your head. And of course, he takes that literally, and he feels so bad because of, A, the friendship that's formed between him and Frodo, and 2, because he felt like it was his job and he failed. That's exactly what's going on with Misato. Gendo told her, you're his guardian now. And she's like, okay, this is her job. She feels like she's failed at her job. And she's also formed a connection with Shinji, and therefore making it even worse. And if you notice something that's different about Misato as well from this point out, is that normally when she takes charge of operations, she is very emotional as hell. That's a major point in Magma Diver. Even though that episode isn't fantastic, that's a major point with how emotionless she can be because she's in command. Here, there's something different. Here, she is literally emotionally invested in here. She's constantly looking through her binoculars to see any sign if Ava Unit 01 is there. She is constantly being like, we gotta get Shinji out of there. I don't care. Shinji is my #1 priority. We're getting him out of there. Because in some ways, I actually believe Shinji actually saved her. I think if it wasn't for the fact that Shinji was in her life, she wouldn't have gotten back together with Kaji. Well, that's kind of a no-brainer. But I think Shinji gave her the kind of love that not even Kaji could give her, and that was that, again, that motherly, older sister kind of responsible kind of love. Something that was really lacking in her life, be it she ready for it or not. But Shinji has benefited Misato's life ridiculously, and so of course she's taken this as personal as fucking possible. And she almost sees it like, oh my god, he saved me, now I've got to save him. And she's willing to do anything to save him. That's great. That's fantastic. That's wonderful. That is just good writing. Oh my god. Rei actually grows a pair of ovaries. Because when Asuka starts, you know, bitching about this and that Shinji's falling apart, that Shinji was stupid for going in there, and she's like, ha ha ha, being the bitch that she is. Rei gets right in her face. Gets right in her fucking face, and is clearly about to smack her. And I was like, yes! Fucking smack that goddamn cat! And of course Misato interrupts. And she's like, no, we're getting Shinji out of there, and yada yada yada, and of course, Rei turns around and turns into a respectable woman. However, this is a good character moment for Rei, because, you know, beforehand, we got the hint that she's starting to grow attached to Shinji, she's starting to grow attached to all these people, hence, I think it was episode 14, where she's basically, it's in her mind, she's trying to sync with 01, and she starts seeing all of her friends, and that's when she starts asking, who am I, what am I, why am I here? Here, it's confirmed how much she actually cares for Shinji and her friends. Because the only time that she did this before was with Gendo. Now she's doing it for Shinji. Now she's doing it for Misato. Now she's doing it for her friends. It shows that she's actually growing a heart. Be like, I need these people. I like these people. I might not openly say it, but you know what? I like these people. They help me, I'm gonna help them. Scratch your back, I'll scratch mine. That's wonderful. That's so good. I'm so happy that that's going on here. I'm so happy to see that. And that only makes episode 23 all the more tragic. And I also have to note this. And this is just in terms of visuals. You know how Asuka always has those two, on her plug suit, she has these two things to keep her hair up? The shadow, and this is a testament to the lighting, and I'm pretty sure it was done on purpose. When she gets into lighting, you still see the blue of her pupils, which is extremely strange considering how actually grounded most of the animation in this series is. But when she's screaming, you just see a bit of a corner of her face and her eyes are just blue, and she looks like a devil. And frightening beyond shit. And Misato just keeps saying, I gotta scold him when he comes back, because I think that's really the only way she's keeping herself kind of grounded, saying he's gonna come back. Because if she said, I gotta scold him when he comes back, because she always says when he comes back, not if he comes back. And I think that's why she's doing it. And of course, then we really start understanding what the mech is. Because Shinji openly states when everything starts getting cloudy in there and his life supports are all cut off, it smells like blood. Blood. You know, blood does have a very distinct smell. And of course he starts freaking out because of that, like who fucking wouldn't? And then we start realizing that these Evas are not just mechs. And now, I brought up earlier in this episode the whole thing with Ritsuko and the friendship between Ritsuko and Misato. And everything after this point between them two is never the same. Because of one key scene. And that's when Ritsuko creates the plan to kill the angel, and Ritsuko at this point believes that, well, Eva Unit 01 is gone. It's done. There's nothing we can salvage. And she is doing what Misato usually does. She is putting on the blank face. She's cutting all emotions out. Of course, she's never had that attachment to Shinji. In fact, we don't really know how she feels about Shinji, to be honest. But that's not important. What is important is that Misato's like, no, we gotta get Shinji out of there, because she's letting her emotions take over, which can be good and can be bad. And Ritsuko takes over. She says, you're not fit for duty, Misato. You're not. I'm taking over. I'm replacing you as commander. And literally from that point on, their friendship is never the same again. Literally, I think this is the catalyst for the episode where everything just starts falling the fuck apart. Ritsuko never really comes over and actually laughs with Misato or shares a drink with Misato. It's never like that really again. Again. Never. No, I'm pretty sure there is one scene in episode 20-something, but even then the dialogue isn't the same. Ritsuko is very quiet. When usually she's actually very expressive even with Misato. And that's no more. We don't get that anymore because of this fight that breaks out between this. Because they have two so different opinions on it. Well, Misato is taking, honestly, the route that I would. And that is, we gotta save Shinji. Ritsuko's thinking the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. So we get these clash of ideologies going on here, which is a theme that Evangelion does frequently, and thus straining the relationship. What really is this catalyst of this is, she brings up what I complained about earlier. Misato actually brings up the fact that they're hiding something Atom, down at the bottom there in Central Dogma. And she's like, Ritsuko, you're a part of this, aren't you? And she's like, she says this great line, she's like, what the hell are the Evas. And Ritsuko's like, I have no idea what you're talking about, lying. And Misato calls that bluff, and she's like, no, you're the one that's lying. And then there's even some great bit of animation is when finally they split up. Misato's kind of calmed down, but she's still fucking pissed just by the look on her face. Ritsuko goes, Misato, you have to trust me. And of course she is lying, and Misato knows she's lying. And Misato knows she's... And then Ritsuko says, I'm taking command. She starts walking away. It's wonderfully shot. And when she's walking away, she gives this quick glare, like death glare, to Misato before she continues walking. And it was at that single moment I said their friendship is done. Whatever they had before this is gone. And Shinji actually brings up a good point during the mind rape scene. The first of many. And actually hit me pretty hard. Shinji says, I've actually found something I enjoy doing. I actually found something I like. I feel belonged. What's wrong with that? And to be honest, I don't know. Because he's literally having this battle that goes on. This is literally a theme for every episode after here. Shinji has some kind of battle within himself about this. Is that he always wants to be more, but he really just can't because, well, that's not who he is. And starts devolving because of it. And it really is because of this situation. Because the Eva is not a mech. The Eva, and this is the episode where he reveals it, the Eva is his mom. Shinji is having this battle that's very much consisting of two polar opposite ideals. One is his father's. His father who is like, Shinji, you're worthless, you're a piece of shit. And then you have Misato's who's like, they even bring up the line, which I like, you did a very praiseworthy thing today from episode 2. So you have these two polar opposite ideas that are trying to mix together, and when you have two polar opposite things trying to, it's basically like fire and ice. They don't mix at all. And that's what's going on here, and I think it's because of that, because that's all Shinji knows for ideals, why he just fucking starts falling apart. And of course there's a lot of external things that come out of this as well, especially in the next episode. But man, this is when everything just starts fucking toppling down. I said in the first episode of Congratulations, things get fucked up really fucking quick. This is when it starts. It's like you're playing Jenga here. You start pulling out the pieces slowly, and that's what's been happening here, and finally somebody did the ballsy fucking move and decided to go off of that second little round and pull it out, so now your tower is wobbling all over the place, and it's just a matter of time before it falls down completely. It's genius! And then we get the most insane, awesome fucking ending ever. And that is Eva 1 goes berserk again. Blood everywhere, fucking... the unnerving scream that comes out of it, which is interesting now, the scream was actually done by the voice actress who plays Shinji. Shinji's played by a girl, believe it or not. And it was actually done by her. That just makes it even more creepy, and actually makes it all the more sense because that is Shinji's robot. Even though they're not robots, because we finally discover what happened to... This is big. We finally discover what happened to Shinji's mom. What happened to Shinji's mom, apparently, is somehow, we don't know quite yet, but she's inside this robot. She is the soul that is inside this thing, making it not a mech. It's not a mech. It's a living being, then. Like, holy shit, let that sink in. Like, it still hasn't really sunk in for me. Because throughout the entire thing, they say, oh, it's a fucking robot. It's a mech. You get in it, you pilot it, that's what mechs do. And from this point on, you're like, okay, then what are they hiding? And Misato actually raises the question that the audience is thinking. Well, if these are apparently copies of the first angel, Adam, clearly they're not, because there's something here that should be screaming no. There's something here that screams that it's more than just that. And Shinji knows that it's his mother. Instantly, when that awesome animation of the white thing touches his face, he's like, oh my god, it's mom. And she's like, are you ready, Shinji? Like, she was the one trying to tell Shinji everything's going to be okay, and Shinji's like, yes, I am ready. And then she takes over. And then Asuka actually says something that I didn't realize either. Asuka actually says, oh my god, I'm piloting something like that? Holy shit. And even the look on Rei's face was like, oh my god. And Misato brings up this amazing line because Ritsuko's freaking out. She's like, oh god, that's not supposed to happen. Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, this is bad. And of course, Misato knows she's been lying this entire time about, you know, her trusting her, and she clearly knows what's going on with the Eva projects. And Misato says, oh my, okay, so if these things are what we built to fight the angels, what does NERV intend to do with them after all the angels are destroyed? So, if you're smart and intelligent about it, you would understand that that's inferencing the human instrumentality project. So that means that the Avas are somehow involved with that. They're the catalyst for something. Now, of course I know what they are, because I've seen the rest of the show, but we'll get into that when, especially, I think it's an end of Evangelion, when we really start seeing that. Man, was that badass. Oh, God. You have to admit, that was pretty goddamn awesome. And then, just to make this episode complete, we have an almost completely parallel scene to when Shinji saves Rei during the episode with the pentagon, I mean triangle-looking angel thingamajigger. Misato is the one to save Shinji. She's like, oh my god, Shinji, you're fine. And then Shinji opens his eyes. He's conscious. He's actually thinking. He's breathing. And she actually breaks down because she's like, oh my god, you're safe. Oh my god. And that was, to me, that brought this episode together in a nice, neat little bow. They even double knotted it just to make it more complete. And Shinji says, I just wanted to see you one more time. That's the pinnacle of Shinji, isn't it? The entire series has been building up to that one point. I just wanted to see you one more time. For once, Shinji was selfish. And it's finally been completed here. And then he just falls apart again after this. But then he comes back in the end of Evangelion. And Misato has a small smile when he says that. It's, oh, perfect. Perfect. And then, of course, Shinji's in the hospital. He wakes up. Rei's right next to him. She goes, oh, it's good to see you're fine. And Shinji's like, and Shinji actually says, I actually feel pretty decent. Rei gives a smile. She's happy for once. She actually gives a positive reaction to something. And she goes, oh, it's good for you. And she gets up and walks out. And of course, Asuka's there and she hides away. And Shinji actually laughs, which is a nice touch as well. And then the final line of the episode is, the smell of blood won't come off. Clever. Clever writing. Anyways, that was the end of this episode, so stay tuned for the next one, and this is Adam Noise from Adam Noise saying, sayonara. Of course Germany would build another Ava other than Unit 02. Of course they would. I mean, they've been trying to take over the world forever now, so this is no surprise. Hello, insects of YouTube, and Adam Noise from Adam Noise, and welcome to the next episode of Congratulations, a Neon Genesis Evangelion Retrospective. Welcome to the next episode of Evangelion known as The Fourth Child, so let's just dive right on into this motherfucker. So the beginning of this episode is a rather well shot, I think a rather well shot, interesting, and cheap way of doing it, and yet at the same time still having very effective, an interrogation scene between Sele and Misato, because Misato was technically in charge of the operation. That kind of fell flat on its face on the previous episode. And of course, and you see, this is what was missing in the previous episode, where the previous episode totally kind of ditches that idea of Adam, that whole thing with Adam there, and just kind of goes off on its own thing. This one is in direct connection with the previous episode, so I give it props for that. But anyways, Misato's covering for Shinji's ass. She's like, nope, he's not going to come to you guys, Sele, and she knows that Sele is also hiding something, as well as Nerve, which that's actually, you get this in this episode significantly. And she goes, nope, fuck you, Sele, you're going to talk to me, you're not going to talk to Shinji. We also discover that what Sele is starting to get worried about are the angel's growing intelligence. They asked the question, do you think that what was happening here was the angel was trying to get into the human psyche, or to try to understand the human psyche, which becomes a significant part later when it comes to Asuka. So that was an interesting point here, as well as they're worried that the what the Evas really are, which we've already established that they're not mechs anymore. They're worried about them escaping and stuff like that. In fact, there's a line that I didn't bring up, no, it could be in this one, so I'm going to hold off on that right now, but I will bring it up in a little bit. And of course, we discovered that Gendo was at that Inquisition of Misato the entire time, which was well hidden, because I was actually really surprised to see Gendo there, and they're like, so Gendo, what do you think? And he's like, well, your time is running short. Your time is running short. He says your time referring to Seele, not his, but yours, which is a nice little note. And thus, we get the return of Toji, who I have stated before, and I will state again, that he is the only sane man in a world gone mad. Because he is. He thinks rationally, believe it or not, well, as rationally as a 14-year-old kid does. He's pretty level-headed, he takes no bullshit. He's also nice when he needs to be nice, he's mean when he needs to be mean, and he also admits his mistake. In fact, later on in this episode, him and Shinji go to Rei's house, and he apologizes again to Shinji, saying, you know, I thought you were a real jerk at first, but now I see you're actually a really kind person. And he admits his own flaws. Toji is like the definition of a good human being, and just to make him even more saintly, he goes sees his sister a lot, who is of course still in the hospital apparently, and he goes sees her every day after school. That kind of thing. He's very dedicated. So Toji really is the only sane person. I mean, Misato has her moments, Ritsuko definitely has her moments, Gendo's definitely not there, Shinji's crazy, Asuka's crazy, and Rei's crazy. Everyone is fucking crazy in Eva. Except for him. So when we discover what his fate is, it makes it all the more tragic, which is one of the reasons why the next two episodes, this episode and the one that comes after this, are probably some of the more tragic. And then Rei comes back, and you see Rei and Gendo, they're in Nerve, right? And Gendo is talking to Rei like a father should to their children. Now, at first, he kind of starts off his business and stuff like that. He's like, okay, what are you doing tomorrow? And she goes, well, I'm seeing Dr. Kagi for more checkups, which has to do with the dummy plug system that we see Rei in at the ending of one of the episodes. And even in this episode, it's explained a lot more. But then all of a sudden, Gendo says, oh, and how is school? And she says, school's going okay. And he's like, I see. Good for you. But he doesn't even bother doing that with Shinji. And to be honest, it really confuses me as to why, and of course it makes a lot more sense later, especially when we have Yui's backstory coming up pretty soon, which I'll definitely dive into it more then, because that very much so not only is a Ryutsuki episode, but very much so is a Gendo episode, without it really intentionally being one. And then what really sparks off this whole episode, because it begins very slowly, it's very much the cycle of Evangelion, is that there was an Eva unit that exploded and just disappeared. I mean, it's one thing if it just exploded. They could have been, well, that's technical disaster. But it just literally up and disappeared, which has some significant foreshadow as to what's to coming. Or as to what's to come. And of course, this freaks everyone out, this freaks Nerve out, this freaks Seele out, this freaks everybody out. And they're trying to get answers, but they're getting no answers, and really the only answer that it revolves down to is there is an angel. An angel is responsible. If that's true, which it is, if that's true, then where is he going to strike next, and what is its purpose? Because they just established in the previous scene that the angels are beginning to, one, work on their own, and two, form an intelligence. So this is freaking the humans out quite a bit. So it's established here that there were basically these two other Evangelions being built. There was one being built in America, and there was another one being built in Germany. And the one that disappeared was Eva Unit 04, which disappeared in America. Which, when Eva Unit 04 returns, and it does, in End of Evangelion, it then becomes clear exactly who was covering this up. And here is where we learn, because we've heard about them before, but here's where we learn what the dummy plug is. Basically, the dummy plug is that soul in the Evangelion to make it work. It's basically a fake pilot. Basically, if the Evangelion, the being inside the Evangelion, thinks that there's a pilot in there, because in order for it to work there needs to be a pilot, then the Evangelion will still work for the humans. In fact, there's an interesting line that says if Rei and Shinji ever find out what's really inside the Evangelions, they'll never forgive us, which is undisputably true. And this here is them saying, well, now we have this process where we might not need a pilot. If we can trick the Evangelion into thinking that there's a pilot, then it'll work with us no matter what. And how do they do this? They do this somehow with Rei, which explains why she was in that tube of LCL, why she was basically meditating in there. That would explain all that. What they were doing was they're taking her soul, her energy, and basically sucking it into this dummy plug. In fact, if you look at what the dummy plugs say, it says Rei right on it, which means that she is that hope. She is that kind of Gendo philosophical ends to piloting the Evas. What's interesting about this episode is that a lot of it is through Toji's point of view, which had not been done before. This is kind of Toji's episode. And of course, he's the one that he's at lunch and he sees Asuka and Shinji kind of fighting because Shinji didn't make her lunch. That's her own goddamn fault. And he calls them an old married couple, which means that, you know, they say that sarcasm means you have a good working brain, which is just more evidence why Toji would be the only sane man in the world gone mad. So it works. And it was also funny to see that Hikari has a tiny little crush on him. And then, of course, I mentioned in the last episode that the relationship between Ritsuko and Misato will never be the same again, and it's evident here, because Ritsuko is keeping some key information away from Misato at this point. She doesn't even really have to lie about it, because I have a feeling that if the incident in the previous episode didn't happen, they would be talking very much so on the friendship level, and Ritsuko would have told Misato everything, despite her not really being able to. But now that Misato has become very suspicious, and that she's very suspicious of what the Eva project is, of course she's going to keep it quiet. She just tells her basically the bare bone information that they're going to bring Eva Unit 03 to Japan and find a pilot here, because this would be the quickest place for that kid to learn, and for that kid to sync with the Eva. And of course Misato is very, very, very annoyed with this, though she doesn't really exactly want to show it. And she kind of brushes Ritsuko off. She's like, okay, I'll trust you, even though she doesn't. She's putting on a fake persona again. She's actually pulling a Kaji in that way. In fact, she even goes to see Kaji later on in the episode, which is a nice little touch. And then I need to point out again that it focuses on Ritsuko having the two cats, the two cat models, one being black, one being white. It focuses on that again. That becomes even more prevalent further up, which, if there's anything Hideki Anno does everything and shoots everything with a reason, which is how movies should be made. And so when he causes you to focus on these two cats, there's some meaning behind it. And when you discover what that is, it smacks you like a ton of bricks. And the other thing that's interesting to note is that we've already talked about how Ritsuko is a fake. She's dyed her hair, she puts on a lot of makeup, she puts on a lot of lipstick. If you look at the cigarette ashtray, on the other hand, it just gets fuller and fuller and fuller as the series goes on. From this point on, it just gets fuller and fuller and fuller and fuller to the point where it actually starts overflowing. And there's always this lipstick all over it, meaning that she's clearly looking for an escape. That nicotine in the cigarettes being that escape. Poor Hikari. Poor Hikari. She hands this paper, and I'm sorry, this is really not a significant moment at all to talk about Hikari, because really she has an unbelievably tiny role in this show, but she hands the paper to Toji and says, you need to give this to Ainami. She's like, oh, I don't want to go there, and she's like, alright, fine. And then she's like, okay, I'll come with you, and then he's like, Shinji, you're coming with me, which is actually a smarter decision because, well, he's dealt with Rei a shit ton of a lot more than he has, and definitely a shit ton a lot more than Hikari has. So it makes a lot more sense logically, but I feel bad for Hikari because she clearly wanted to go for a walk with him and he just kind of leaves her in the dust and she's like, Shinji starts cleaning up Rei's room, and it's interesting to note because when Shinji first walked into Rei's room way back in episode 3, his reaction and Toji's reactions are totally the opposite. Shinji just kind of walks in, looks around, he's probably thinking of it, but he doesn't say it. While Toji says it, that she's like, my god, this room is a pigsty. Okay, I'm paraphrasing, but that's essentially what he says. And when Shinji starts cleaning it up, which I think was a very nice touch on Shinji's part, she starts cleaning up the mess that is in Rei's room, and just kind of that level of friendship and kind of trust between the two. Toji very much so does the arrogant 14-year-old male thing and says, nope, I'm not cleaning up, nope, that's not my job, nope, nope. And of course, he doesn't. And then of course, Rei returns, and she says, for the first time you ever hear her say, arigato, which is thank you in Japanese. And when they all leave, she lies down in her bed and she starts thinking, she's like, I just said thank you. Literally, she's like, I just said thank you. I don't even say that quote, I don't even say that to him, meaning Gendo. Because even in the previous scene, they kind of emphasized and kind of foreshadowed that she was going to say thank you, was because Gendo says, let's go eat, and Rei says, yes, sir. She doesn't say, okay, or yay. She says, yes, sir. Very formal. And then here she's like, oh, thanks. And she doesn't realize it, and this is the moment where she's like, my god, these people are really important. These people are important in my life. I need these people. In fact, there's some connection between her and Shinji we discover later that really explains why she reacts the way she does to Shinji. A very motherly kind of way. And we once again get that conflicting viewpoints of the world with Ryutsuki and Gendo. Because really, they've been hand in hand this entire time, but yet they have two completely opposite opinions. They want to get to this same point, but they have two completely different ways of getting there. Well, Gendo is very much so, believe it or not, more warm-hearted about it, where he's like, well, it's better we do it this way. Gendo being warm-hearted, I know. Well, that's compared to Ryutsuki, which Ryutsuki, again, has had that philosophy that I would rather have a planet where humans live in complete sin than a planet where no humans exist at all. Which I completely disagree with. And Ryutsuki brings this up here. Ryutsuki's like, this is this city, this is Earth's haven, this is the human haven. We come here and we build out of our cowardness. And Gendo agrees. But Gendo says it's the city's fault that a lot of stuff has happened. Is that people come here to hide because they're cowards. They're not willing to face the realities of what the world is throwing at them. So again, that's just an example of how they both want to come to the same point, but they have completely different and opposing viewpoints of how that works. Where Ryutsuki sees this as a haven, Gendo sees this as a prison. That's essentially what the scene entails. And to prove the point, Ryutsuki says the line, cowards do live longer. And then Gendo says an interesting line. He says, of course the committee would be angry with the disappearance of the Unit 04. It was an unscheduled accident. Unscheduled accident, which entails that some bad things happen and they make it look like it was an accident, but it's not. Which that is a foreshadow to a scene that goes on when Misato's talking with Kaji. Kaji reveals to her that the Marduk Committee, or the Marduk Organization, or the Marduk Foundation, which was something that was talked about a lot but we'd never seen, there's a reason for that, and that's because it doesn't exist. Nerve has been pulling the strings the whole time. Who's in charge of Nerve? Gendo. That means Gendo is the puppeteer, and he's pulling everything along. Seele, of course, is frightened of this. They call him a zealous individual in future episodes. And that is exactly why. Gendo is very manipulative, whether you want to admit it or not. Now, when we finally see Kaji, it's really interesting to note that when he throws his can of juice, or whatever the fuck he was drinking, in the recycling bin, we see that the recycling bin is overflowing, and he just lets it drop to the ground. A couple things I want to point out. One, notice that the can is green. Why is the can green? That's very important, actually, believe it or not, because if we remember one of the first episodes with Asuka, in fact it was their second episode, we see a scene where where they're moving in together, and Misato's explaining everything, and you notice that Asuka and Shinji are drinking sodas. The same sodas in which Kaji is drinking. Kaji is drinking a green one. What color was Shinji's? Oh yeah, that's right, Shinji's was green. Now we also know later on in this episode that Shinji and Kaji become very close. Kaji basically becomes like that older brother to Shinji. And Shinji feels very comfortable, or at least I think that's how Kaji viewed it. I'm not sure how Shinji views it. But there's something about Kaji that makes Shinji feel unbelievably comfortable. And I think that was a nice, subtle way to explain it. It's kind of like how on Pacific Rim, Guillermo del Toro explained that there's a scene where Idris Elba's character, the Marshal, goes up to meet the main protagonist, and he's sitting in this half circle, meaning that his circle, his life is not complete. That was a nice bit of symbolism. This is very much so the same way. Symbolism explaining that Shinji's going to feel extremely close to Kaji in the scenes coming up. And then, of course, as soon as foreshadow, this is a bit of foreshadow concerning Maya's sexuality, because she doesn't respond to dreamy Kaji's advances at all. In fact, she shuts up and then just kind of skedaddles out of there when Misato arrives. However, Misato knows that this was a ploy, and that's exactly what it was. It was a ploy just to get her attention, and just to get Misato's attention. And when they leave, Kaji Kaji somehow stacked all of those cans nice and neatly. That really does explain the paradox of his character in a nutshell, doesn't it? It shows that he has this playboy kind of... I've already said this, so I'm not really going to talk into it much, but he has that outward appearance of a playboy, but that inside of a very organized, plotting individual. And of course, Shinji, if you look at how Shinji talks to people, he talks to them very formally. That's part of the intrinsic character nature of him. Kaji actually points this out to him, unlike any of the other characters, and says, you know, you can't just call me Kaji. And what does Shinji do? He starts actually calling him Kaji. A very informal thing. Just another way to explain how comfortable Shinji winds up feeling with him. Now, Shinji talks... Kaji shows... The watermelon scenes are very key. They're very important for Shinji's character. And here's why. When Kaji brings Shinji down to his garden, and you see that, one, I think it's cool that they added that Kaji has a hobby, and basically Kaji's down there doing it because that gives him a lot of time to reflect when he's watering his plants and stuff like that. That gives him a lot of time to reflect. That makes logical sense. And Shinji, then he asks Shinji, do you hate suffering? Because he can see that Shinji is suffering, and he is. What's cool is that Shinji actually starts speaking. He's like, I don't like it. He actually starts speaking how he, as much as I hate to say it, how he feels towards Kaji, because he can't do... He usually pushes Misato away when she wants to talk to him and knows something's up. He definitely pushes Asuka away. Rei doesn't ever ask. Gendo's a terrible father, and Ritsuko just doesn't give a flying fuck. So the fact that he is willing to open up to Kaji says how comfortable he is. Even to look in Shinji's eyes, great animation, shows just how comfortable he feels. And of course, the big reveal in this episode, and that would explain why it's focused on Toji so much, is that Toji has been chosen to pilot Unit 03. Now that is a big difference from the Rebuild movies. Now in the Rebuild movies, it's Asuka. Asuka is the one that's chosen to be the practice or the test pilot for Unit 03. That makes a lot of sense in that continuity, but here, I think it was a perfect decision to make Toji that third pilot, and I love how they do it. They just call him in, and they don't expressively say what's going on, but all you hear is Ritsuko's voice. That was nice. That was well done. And then, of course, Gensuke has found out a lot by digging. What do I mean by digging? He's basically been searching, and he says how much he wishes he was chosen to be Unit 03's pilot, and Shinji doesn't like that, but Shinji doesn't comment on that because, well, Shinji's not that kind of person. He's informed through Kensuke that they're searching for another pilot and that they're getting to Unit 03, meaning Misato hasn't told him. Misato usually keeps Shinji up to snuff when it comes to this kind of shit. Or at least the bare bones minimum up to snuff. This time she hasn't even told him anything. And I think a lot of that was actually for his own good. Because Shinji went through a lot in the previous episode. In fact, they bring it up in the previous scene where Shinji's sync rate is falling because of this, the psychological trauma that he went through. And therefore, I think it's almost a very respectful thing for Misato not to tell him. Some people view that as the opposite, saying that that's Misato kind of falling back. She's so driven, finding out, trying to uncover nerve, that she loses sight of her major job. I don't think she ever loses sight of her major job, and that's being the kids' guardians. I don't think she ever does, because that's not what her character entails. I think she was doing it for the kids' own protection. And literally from the point that we find out that Toji has been picked to be the new pilot, Toji's character takes a complete 180-degree turn. He's very somber, he's very quiet, and of course everyone notices, especially Hikari, because she's clearly got an undying crush on him. You know what, that's only natural for a kid to do that. They try to pretend to be themselves when really they're not. I did it, everybody else does it. In fact, when he forgets to bring lunch, which is something very important, it's very clear in the previous episode that he says lunch is his favorite time of day. Of course he's going to eat lunch, he's a growing boy. He forgets it, and Hikari comes over and says, you know, I make lunch for my sisters, I can make one for you. And Toji says, no. Very polite, which is unlike Toji, but then all of a sudden Toji changes it, saying, but I'll gladly eat their leftovers. Meaning that he's trying to at least present himself, one, to keep her happy, a very selfless thing, which we've already established as part of his character, and two, to try to maintain that presence that he hasn't really changed, even though he has. Another great example of this is when he's playing basketball. Beforehand, if we ever saw him playing basketball, he was very quick to shoot. He never really adjusted his shots. And this one, he's very slow. And he's sitting there, ready to take the shot, and he's doing the math in his head. And then he takes a shot, and of course he makes it. That's not Toji. Something's going on here. My guess is that he actually really doesn't want to pilot the Eva. He finally understands Shinji's point, because he asked Shinji, why don't you like piloting the Eva? The Evas are awesome, get to pilot a giant fucking robot. And now he finally understands what Shinji means. This means a lot of work. It means a lot of work, and it's a lot of shit. So much pressure on a 14-year-old kid. That's a lot of goddamn pressure. That's more pressure than you guys could possibly even dream of. And we no episode of Evangelion's complete without Asuka's bitchiness. And Asuka goes barging into Kaji's room, and the animation is rather funny because she's like, how dare he not talk to me? And then suddenly the door opens, she's like, all cute and adorable. And of course, Kaji says, I'm sorry, I'm very polite. He's like, I'm sorry, I'm busy. And she says, fuck that, because that's what Asuka does. And she goes running up to him and sees what he's doing, and that's when she finds out that the next pilot is Toji, which for some reason outrages her. I don't understand why she's outraged by that. I don't get it, but she's outraged by it. She's outraged by it. So I'm not going to do a time for religious symbolism, but I'm going to say that this is very important. Notice whenever there is a cross, it has something to do with an angel. So this episode I have a couple issues with. One, it feels like such a filler. I feel like a lot of the stuff that they could have done could have easily been done in the first half, and then the second half been something else, and I would have saved them an episode. But at the same time, I can't feel myself saying this is a bad episode. It's not a bad episode. There isn't really, except for the last two episodes, a bad episode of Evangelion. There really isn't. I mean, there's a lot of good character stuff in here. And considering how really action-packed the last two episodes have been, this is kind of like that calm before the storm. Because the next episode, shit hits the fan. And when I mean shit hits the fan, I mean it's like projectile shit getting thrown at you. And boy, does it stink. Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode. I'm Adam Noyce from Adam Noyce saying, sayonara.